Can you say something?
Yeah, so now I can talk. I just brought the microphone a little bit closer. Oh, now when I tilt it up, there's a bit more echo. Let's see.
Yeah,
So,
you're coming kind of hot. Yeah.
let's see. Let's see. Here's a pillow I can prop up. Okay, that might be. So let's see. That's still coming. If I get a little closer, that definitely sounds better. If we do video, it's going to be difficult for me to get it to like too close. But
What is your mic?
I have one of
Okay.
these guys, but I'm not at home, so I'm traveling right now, so I don't have my mic stand that can just kind of is like propped up in a jar.
Okay. Let me see. Okay.
But I can kind of like, if we don't do video, I can just put myself around some pillows.
That's all right.
I mean, this is how I record courses.
All right. Oh yeah. Well, yeah. That probably makes great sound effect. So, can you say something? I'll just try some things on my end.
Yeah, sure. So I'm just gonna keep talking here.
All right.
And I'll grab my phone. I wrote down a couple notes about some of the things that you wanted to talk about.
Mm-hmm.
So I'll just keep talking and.
Okay. Yeah.
Are you adjusting some settings?
Yeah. So basically, Skype has input/output audio
cool.
from the speaker. So it took us like 2 years to figure that out. And last time I recorded, I just got back from vacation and I had someone who I'd known forever sign up. And so I was like, this is going to be a great conversation. We'll just make it easy. And I forgot to plug in my mic. So it was recorded from my laptop mic. Totally. And so it was just like, so everyone was just like, your audio sucks. I'm like, like no one ever has written in
right.
Like for a year. And then all of a sudden someone's like, you suck. I'm like, ah.
You're like, are you in your bedroom?
Yeah, man. What's up? So I was like,
I'm gonna
anyway.
try putting a pillow right there, and that might soften it just a little bit. But now I can hear it bouncing off the walls like behind me.
It doesn't sound that bad to me. So, and in fact, if you sound like if there's a little reverb, you sound better that way. You sound like from voice on high, like you're authoritative, you know.
Chris, in the past, I've done a GarageBand recording while we like during the conversation. Do you want me to fire that up?
If you don't mind, yeah.
Sure.
My producer will love you for that.
Yeah, no worries.
So, yeah.
So you wanted to talk about. I was kind of excited to see that you wanted to go over like advanced workflows and kind of techniques and stuff that go beyond the basics, because I feel like that has been what has motivated me most, like to create training and write articles and stuff like that.
Right.
So yeah, I'd love to hear a little bit more about maybe some of the things that you want to cover or that like you want to ask me about.
You know,
I'm happy with that too.
I'm mostly at your like your knowledge, because I feel like I'm not a sketch expert, and to be honest, like I just realized my sketch was out of date like 2 weeks ago, so I had to go update it because I was using the Sketch Mac App Store version. And I was like, man, this is really kind of old and out of date. It's been a while. And I realized like, oh wait, I ignored all the warnings to go download it. So I'll
skip for now.
Yeah, skip for now. And then I came back like, oh, I'm really out of date. And I'm like, that made me feel sad that I missed that, but also I felt happy because I felt like, oh wow, they've actually been pouring a lot of new things into Sketch that I've been missing. So I'm kind of like at your like where you want to go in terms of what the advanced features are and what people should know. But you know, for me, you know, we could probably save this conversation for later, but if you remind me to prompt me to bring it up. But I feel as though you know, as someone who's been trained on Adobe products forever, and Adobe's, you know, been around forever. You know, also I'm at a disadvantage again because I really gravitated towards Photoshop in my in my younger years, and so I know Photoshop pretty well. I can go in there, I can get what I need done, and get out
Yeah.
faster than I could Illustrator. And so I'm kind of glad Flash didn't survive because I felt like I should have just gone to Illustrator, and done Flash, and I would have like had this great career.
Yeah.
But now like the resurgence with SVG and all that, and but they're all, and I'll mention this later on, but there's always been a kind of application that says like, oh, this is going to be the Photoshop killer. This is going to be, the application. And it feels like Sketch is hung around the longest.
Yeah.
Of all those. So.
Yeah, it definitely, like a lot of people, I think a few years ago, there were just so many articles. It was like Sketch versus Photoshop. And, it seems like people have kind of gotten on with their work, which is really what we should all be just doing. Right. It doesn't really matter quite as much. Like there's still things that I jump into Photoshop for occasionally, or things that I jump into Illustrator for occasionally. And like there's never going to be a silver bullet tool. I think like especially digital designers, because we're making things that are software, and like we're very focused on the tools that we're using, and it really doesn't matter quite as much. It's easy to obsess over it, but there's really and like one thing that I've thought a lot about is so I did some work on Flinto. I helped design the original version of Flinto, and the designing a design tool is really kind of a fascinating challenge. One of the things that it really makes you think about is like, to what extent can we create a tool that allows you to design or prototype like things that haven't been made yet, haven't been like things that we don't currently see. It's easy to say like, oh, well, like we'll spring load like a bounce animation or something. But when you start thinking about like, well, when Apple came out with iOS 7, how did they prototype background blurs and some of the new things that they were doing? Well, they actually had to like code that, because no prototyping tool, no design tool was like made. No design tool had those features. So like, how much do our design tools just kind of like keep us creating the same thing?
Right.
And to that extent, like, should we be quite as like religiously married to just like thinking this is the workflow, this is the tool, this, so.
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely like this like fish in the fishbowl type of feel for designers. Like whenever there is a new, at least for a while, like whenever there was a new Apple redesign of their site, within 3 months you could see those design effects and websites, and so it got kind of annoying actually. And and I was guilty of it, the same as everyone else was, but yeah. So I can definitely feel like if you live the tool, you start designing with the traits of the tool coming into your work, and so I feel like that's definitely a part of it. So. But yeah, so that's also like another reason why I'm really happy that Sketch is around, is because it feels like, oh wow, we're really kind of breaking out of like this palette syndrome that Adobe has, of just like tabs everywhere and stuff like that too.
Just add another palette.
Yeah, exactly. So it just, to me it feels just like, it's a lot more options too, but just like as any design tool, but it just feels like almost more dashboardy type of feel to it, where I can.
Yeah,
like, it feels like almost like I guess a sports car, and it feels like
right.
Yeah,
one or two fewer things, but the things that it does a lot faster. I'm kind of curious to hear your perspective on training. You were one of the creators of Front End Masters, right?
No, I'm not. No.
What was that? Am I confusing it with something else? I'm so sorry.
No, it's all right. No, yeah. So we did Environments for Humans, which is an online conference company. So we've done a lot of, like, for 5, 6, 7, I don't know how many years, many years. We did conferences every month about different topics. So like 1 month would be like CSS, then be JavaScript, then we do content strategy, accessibility, which is great because and I totally love it because I feel like I'm more of a generalist in a lot of ways
Yeah.
because I get this.
Yeah.
I love content strategy. I love making sites accessible. I love CSS. CSS is my main passion because I just feel like I love design and I love computers and I love the web. So it's just I love people.
Shared passion there.
Yeah, and so I just love everything about the web, and I love people who are specialized, and I love people who aren't.
Yeah.
Webmasters, or whatever. And so UX, we did UX stuff. So, but recently, we kind of but I just got kind of burnt out talking to everyone. I guess we're doing a conference every month, and we still do CSS DevConf, which is happening in October, and so we love that, and that's also kind of like a community based one because that's a double blind voting on sessions, and so we feel like that's where the content is, I guess, more king, if you will, there. So and so that's what we love about that one. But so we should try to wind that down, the online stuff, and so I've actually been working with front end masters, I guess, since April.
Okay.
And so as working on their publishing stuff and trying to hopefully help them polish some of their content stuff and get courses out sooner than later, and then also kind of help them with it's sort of the same thing I do for E4H, is just that I do a lot of different things, but I'm able to spend more time polishing on them and stuff like that too. So
yeah.
But yeah, cool.
That's great. Yeah. So you're no stranger to kind of like what it takes to get good training and good content out there.
Right. Yeah. I mean, it takes. Yeah. So we talk about your courses, but yeah. So like training is very tough, and I've seen a lot of speakers. I think at one point we've had I think over 500 speakers that we've seen throughout E4H. So we've seen a lot of really like a wide range of styles of terms of people who are there. So so what are your thoughts on like training for the web?
Well, I haven't created training so much for the web. I think that one thing that I realized is and that I would definitely want to talk about is the fact that we live in kind of this, we live in a time of like 99-cent apps and free apps. And then we also, and like free Medium articles and free YouTube videos. And, then there's Stack Overflow. And like so many of us are either fully or partially self-trained.
Right.
So there's like a reticence to spend money on like developing ourselves through actual workshops or like maybe an online course that's like specialized in one thing.
Yeah.
And it's kind of funny because it's more just conditioning than I think actually where the values of most professionals are. Like we all so I took when I learned front end development, I took a 10-week course on it, and God, I can't imagine how long it would have taken me to figure out all of those things, or to train myself on all those on my own. I would have had to figure out from 100 different sources, like what I should learn, and then learn it, and then like who's there to help me when I mess up, and so there's like one of my kind of beliefs about training is there's like it makes sense for there to be a lot more information out there for free, but also there's just still immense value in like really good training, whether it's on person or online. And it's so easy to kind of forget that because our time is really valuable. And when somebody guides us through saying like on this specialized topic, like here's exactly the stuff that you should learn, and here's where you're probably going to mess up, and here's the way you can get around that, like not trying to sugarcoat that. There's a lot of training out there, unfortunately, that tries to make it seem like this workflow for anything is really smooth. Yeah. And it rarely is, whether it's web or design. And And so for my courses, I really wanted to focus on like what are the things that are what are the gotchas,
Yeah.
and what are the you know, you can oftentimes you can create a design or you can build something on the web in a few different ways, and it's going to look the same, but it might respond a little differently, and it might have repercussions later when you try and add on to it.
Right.
Uh, and so getting like a comparison. So for example, in Sketch, there are a few different ways to use images in your designs.
Right.
Well, let's compare those up front and then figure out like, well, based on what we're designing, this is going to make the most sense. But if you want to have control over that, then you're going to have to use a different approach. And like, it's really the same with front end. But it would be far easier to just kind of create a tutorial that says, we're going to make an app. Here's how you do it.
Right.
And then like, here's how you bring an image in. Boom. Well, you know how to bring images in. And it's like, like design isn't always creating the same thing. Like it's not always creating the music player or the Twitter app, you know. So I'm a big fan of kind of exploring the tough bits. Yeah.
Yeah, I totally agree because like I've only been with front-end masters, you know, full time for a few months, and so I've you know audited or sat through I think about like over I think about 20 days worth of workshops.
Yeah.
And I feel the quality that you get is one, of course, you get the, you know, it's not just a 45-minute session, you know, like you get at a conference or what, like a conference talk or whatever that, you know, and which is what we, you know, did for E4H is just a lot of, you know, we do content summit, but it'd be like, you know, 45 minutes a day. We did used to do online workshops back in the day, several years ago, but just didn't think we could do it. But one of the things I liked about Front End Masters is that one, you get more of a deep dive into a topic, but also it's the Q&A aspect of it that happens as a teachers go through and say, like, you know, a student has a question about what's going on, or like wants to add like, well, why don't you do this instead of that, and you know, those type. And I think that's where like the real knowledge comes in, and say like,
yeah,
like why are you doing this, and basically that'll just saves me time and money, pretty much, you know, by knowing, you know, knowing where the pitfalls are and the rationale behind the choices that you made. And so, yeah, definitely there's just a lot of, like, go to your point about a lot of free tutorials out there, and people kind of and I feel like, you know, that's just the nature of the web for some reason. Just like, you know, we want to share knowledge, and our industry is very unique to other industries where we share knowledge just so easily. And you know, you can point that to view source for a browser always being in the browser, but I think it's just also the nature of the web being free. But also at some point, you know, there's got to be someone has to put like some serious, you know, thinking behind a tutorial.
Yeah, and well, that's really it. I mean, it's also like you can make a quick little explainer of something that you did, but if you're going to figure out the best way to do something, and you want to really dive, you know, do a lot of research, and like this last course that I put out, which is it's more advanced. It's about Sketch and SVG workflows. I spent 8 months making it because I was determined to figure out the best way of doing every workflow and getting to the bottom of questions that had always plagued me, like what are all of those little tags and attributes and stuff at the top of an SVG? When do I need them? When can I delete them? And like, there are a couple little Stack Overflow conversations about it, but they're not definitive. And I haven't seen anybody publish research about like, well, I just tested, you know, 20 different browsers, and I just talked to people who who engineer the browsers, and so like I did that, and I wrote that article, and or like there were some optimizations that didn't exist in any SVG tool, and so I built my own optimizer, and it was like that's the level of kind of deep dive that we should be learning from, and there are people who specialize in certain areas who kind of like already figure that stuff out with their work. I figured a lot of that out, through my work, but those are the things that we should be learning from, rather than just a quick free thing put up on YouTube that says how to do something, and like maybe yeah, well, you got it done, but
Right.
not the definitive way.
Right. And I do want to get back to the optimizer and want to talk about that, but it's just like, but yeah, there is a different like trade off in terms of like time, money. You know, like I love that point you made about, yeah, I could read 200 free articles, and I might know what I'm talking. Like I might like get to the point to where I become a master, or I could just spend, an afternoon,
Right.
through a course that's like more definitive, spend more time on it, and then I can get up to speed faster. Like, which one do you want to be? You want to spend like, forever like trying to get up to speed? And that's one of the things that I love about Friend Masters. I don't want to talk about Friend Masters all the time, but they are my I do work for them. But I do. They're one of the people like I felt like in terms of courses is like I know I'm not a JavaScript expert, and I keep on trying to learn JavaScript and get better at it. But it wasn't until like I sat through all these like 20 plus days workshops. Like, oh, I finally understand the scope and the landscape of JavaScript. And so then I could start, I'm a visual person, I'm a designer. And so I could start like filling in like, oh, okay, this is where things are connecting. And as someone who's been around, the web before there was JavaScript, I was like trying to piece together, where I left off JavaScript and where those connections are made. And so, and you get people who maybe write articles about JavaScript that are, that just started like a year ago, they don't know the legacy of what's happening beforehand. And so, not that they need to know it, I'm just saying that that's better. But for my case, I need to know like the ramp up from like what I've known before and where we're going next. And so I find that very refreshing to learn and to understand that. And not that, people need to have a workshop about like the history of the web because but I find that's very.
I couldn't agree more. I wrote an article about pixel density because I was just like, there are a couple really technical things out there, but nobody's. It was actually for one of my courses. I was like, if I'm gonna go into like UX workflows, like I just want people to have a great explainer for like what the hell 1x and 2x and 3x and 1.5x and all that stuff and like why it exists. And it exists because of like a very digestible history that like I just told pretty quickly of like higher resolution displays and like devices that fake it and why they fake it and just a little bit of that stuff. And the history can be tremendously helpful for learning. It's also a story. And like as humans, we're programmed to remember stories more than just facts, you know?
Right. Yeah, I feel like stories, like I just, we can get totally off tangent here. But but like I just feel like the history of the web is great, but I feel like also I'm kind of biased and actually like saw it. But also I feel like people, are people, right? And they have needs. Like they want to like, hey, I just want to get my job done and leave at 5 p.m. or whatever. And, and just get the job done. And so I totally get that. But in terms of education, I feel like, if we could be succinct about like the history of the web in terms of like why the rationale of why we do things the way we do, it just helps so much in terms of the context, just knowing the context behind that. But I do want to get back to the optimizer and talk about like, there is an SVG that's out there as an optimizer. Why did you make your own optimizer? And it's free out there for people to use, which I found like it's totally awesome. To have that. But like, why did you make your own optimizer?
Chris, quick question: Are we recording right now?
Yeah, is that okay? Is that right?
Yeah, sure. Okay. I didn't realize that. I wasn't sure if we were just doing a pre-talk. Yeah. Let me. Is it okay if we break continuity real quick?
Yeah, problem.
I'm just gonna plug my computer in because I thought we would start in a minute. No problem. Hang on one sec. No problem. All right.
Hey, no problem. So yeah, sorry about that. I just thanks for not being angry about that. But I felt like having such a great conversation that I was
Yeah,
just like,
yeah,
hey, I want to ask you more questions and see how it goes.
totally.
So, but yeah,
Um, yeah, I mean, I trust you to put it together however you think is best. Um,
hmm
yeah, let's talk about the optimizer.
yeah.
It's
So
it's called SVG though.
yeah, yeah. So why? Like, there's the free SVG optimizer out there. Uh,
hmm
People using it. I don't know how good they are, but I've seen a couple web browser optimizers out there, and you just upload your file, and it sort of looks good when I get back, So like,
Yeah.
and so why create your own
Why
optimizer?
did I? Yeah. Why create my own? Well, the first thing to mention is that I didn't set out to duplicate anything that was already out there.
Yeah,
Um, it was the cool thing about SVG is that unlike other formats like JPEG or PNG, it's not. You can open up an SVG file and like understand the markup that you see. Um, the only things that SVG optimizers are doing is like making very clear changes. So, for example, a really easy one to imagine is when you write in an attribute. So, for example, you write an attribute for opacity, and then you write like zero point 0.5 for 50% opacity. Well, that zero before the decimal isn't actually necessary for, it's like optional, but if you have a bunch of attributes that have zeros before decimals, you can cut down a little bit on the file size, just like ever so slightly. There are optimizations that are far more impactful for the file size, and then some that aren't really so much for the file size, but more for the kind of reliability or kind of restructuring of the information itself inside an SVG. So um, I created SVGito with a few optimizations that aren't in SVGO. And I love SVGO. I use it in the SVG OMG web app, and it works really well after SVGito. So it has some optimizations that are more fundamental, that are kind of more optional. So whereas SVG-OMG or SVGO rather is just trying to kind of compress the file size, and it has like 30 different options to do that. I kind of wanted to say, well, maybe like it's really easy for a person to tell when their graphic looks wrong. And sometimes, for example, fill rule attributes aren't necessary. The best way to do that is to have an optimization that can kind of figure out some easy cases where fill rule attributes aren't necessary, just remove them, and then also give you the option to just get rid of all of them and give you a little preview. And if it looks the same, then you're good to go. And that's not something that would work on every file, but it can be really helpful, like a lot of the time. The optimization that inspired me to create it was Sketch changed how it exports borders a little bit, and there was like this one edge case that created a just like more markup than I thought was necessary, and so I got tired of making the changes myself in the code, and I was like, this is what computers are for.
right.
and and yeah, I mean, I'm continuing to add optimizations to it, and I think I mean, really, it's just a free contribution to the design and development community. It works best with SVGO, and you know, I'm happy to that's the sort of thing that like I can create because I'm selling a course for more than free.
Yeah.
And so I'm able to put some resources and time into creating a new tool.
Cool. Yeah. So it sounds like your optimizer is for people who you work in Sketch, you have to, so if someone has a Sketch app SVG, they take it out and then they just run it through your optimizer, and then they can also take it through SVGO and then see if they get any more savings out of that file. So
Yeah,
yeah, cool.
fix a couple little things, and SVG is just so cool because when you open it up, it's all right there. It
Yeah.
says like I made a circle, it's red, and then I made this other like custom path, and
Right.
like you can edit some text in there, and so it's just a fantastic technology.
Right. I want to get to that point where I can read SVG like I can HTML and CSS. That's why I want to get to a point like where it becomes like the Matrix type of thing. Like, oh man.
You'd be surprised. It's you're probably already almost already there.
Yeah, I feel like if it's a circle, I could definitely suss it out. So,
Yeah.
anything a little bit more complex, like, oh man, is this a taxi cab? I don't know, but I like that because also it reminds me of uh, Google's new optimizer for JPEG. It's I'm gonna just butcher the name. I think Gitzel. I think it's Gitzly. I think is the name of it. And so it's actually it's not like a normal JPEG compressor, but it kind of like it does A/B testing of your JPEG compressions. And so
Oh,
it's a
cool.
very slow process. It's not as like you jump it into Image Optim and it spits it
Yeah.
out. It takes for it goes and does actual calculations based off of its own logarithms, and then it spits out a JPEG that's almost like 40% smaller, like almost like by you get like 60% of what the original output,
Yeah.
and then you can actually run it again through Image Optim and get like 2% more out of it. And I just like, wow, this is so amazing, and especially like I think with the responsive web design is there's like been this embrace of line art, which is I think one of the
Yeah.
great things that makes Sketch so popular is that for vector illustrations is that now we have like this big honking JPEG with like as our main like poster frame for our websites, and so I was like, well, if we can just have the file size of our JPEGs just by using this new logarithm, like this new optimizer, like it's totally worth it
Yeah.
for doing that. So yeah, so that's another thing. Like the responsive web design, I think that's another reason why we have so much exploration into SVG and line art to make it so. So yeah,
And it's really capable of so much more. I feel like maybe this is just my own taste, but I think we can graduate from from the line art era.
yeah,
In some ways, it's really cool, and it should continue to exist as like one kind of illustration style.
yeah,
But there's so many things that you can create. Obviously, you can put anything into a bitmap. You can create so much just with SVG, with like live vector graphics in the browser, that have blend modes on them, and whatever you want to create. There's I think that digital design and the illustration that kind of factors into it is starting to graduate to like realizing that it might be nice if we have a little watercolor illustration in there or something, and that's good. We don't need everything to just look like it was perfectly made by a computer.
yeah.
It's actually really hard. I'm working on a project right now where I've been cutting a bunch of stuff out of paper,
Yeah.
and then bringing it into the computer, vectorizing it, and now
Nice.
putting it as SVG. It can be with entire website layouts, especially, but sometimes even within a graphic, it can be really hard to make something not look perfect like a computer made it. And but it feels so much more warm and like human.
Right.
So
Yeah,
that's kind of what I'm interested in.
Yeah, that's totally what I love. It's like I was working for like one of my first web jobs. I was just like, I needed an icon of a pencil, and this is like, and so, but there was no icons of pencils that I liked online, and so I actually went out of my like digital like web office, went around to all the offices looking for, hey, do you have a number two pencil? Do you have a number two pencil? And then I found one, at the front desk, and I was like, can I borrow this? And they're like, sure, why? And of course, I should have just told some BS answer, like, I filling out a Scantron or something like that. But I told her the whole entire story of like, yeah, I'm going to scan. And so basically I took the pencil, scanned it in, took it into Photoshop, cleaned it up, and then so I had an icon, and it looked like a real pencil. It didn't look like this fake cartoony pencil like that felt, that didn't feel
Yeah.
well. So and so like this small office I was with, it was turned out to be like the story of the day, how I was so weird that I would actually, but I felt like that's really a great way of just like taking your environment and putting it to your work. And even so, like there's a tutorial that I loved was like I think it was Trent Walton did it,
Yeah.
but I'm not really sure. But he actually took like, I don't know if it's him, but I felt like it feels like it's something he would do. But he actually take a pan and all the scratch marks on a pan, scan that in, and then he has a texture of that pan,
A texture,
and
yeah.
then bring that in. And I was like, wow, that's so awesome to like just bring in your organic nature of your surroundings into your pan. And so and just look at photos for textures and stuff like that. I felt like and then bring that into artwork. And so
Yeah.
it feels like a lot more like organic that way. And so I totally understand it. But like I think I'm kind of reacting a little bit to probably delayed reaction to like delayed. So I hope it's not doesn't come out too much. But like there was a time when like just every website just like looked like a big honking photograph with vector
Right.
icons with some text underneath it, and I was just like, not every website needs to look like this. So,
Absolutely.
but yeah, I know we come a long way, and I feel like I'm kind of past the Cosby sweater of SVG too. I'm kind of like oh, it's multicolored '90s. Like I'm okay. We don't need to relive that decade. Sorry, but
Yeah, I think, a huge part of like because what we're talking about here is ultimately styles and
right.
fashions that come and go in digital design, and that's I mean, I think that's a huge byproduct of not only what else we see out there, but the tools that we're using. And I always try to do as much as possible with pen and paper before jumping into the computer when it comes to determining when it comes to like drawing an icon or figuring out the style. I've increasingly with my projects been looking to different design styles through history that might be really intriguing to pull from, and it's not that our tools aren't capable of that, but it's just not the default, and it's just not, for example, like when you're making something for the web, like computers want to make rectangles. They want to make solid rectangles.
Right.
And like when you start trying to say like, I want this to be at a funky angle, but I want like everything to just line up perfectly along it. You have to get into all of these hacks just to make a computer do something that like it goes a little bit against its grain.
Right.
But the result of doing that is so much more interesting. And so I've been finding a lot of inspiration just by looking at like mid-century art, old lithographic posters from the 1920s and in Europe, or diving a lot more deeply into typography and figuring out like how that's going to inform the design of a site. Like there's a really cool italic and face that, and maybe like I'm going to reproduce its angle in the way that the website is laid out or something, and some cool ways that aren't the typical jumping off point for like for a web layout or an app layout.
Right. Yeah, that's awesome. That's because I feel like that's because you want every element of your website to describe the emotion that you want the content, like what the content is, what's the emotion, and you want to have every element be in resonance with what you're trying to say. And so, and it's not all gonna be like one big JPEG with vector icons. So there's
and there's a huge difference too. I've been reflecting on this a lot recently. There's a huge difference between tool-based design and kind of illustrative or marketing-related design. That's an exposition for something. So when you need to use a tool like an app, if you're designing an app, like you better make sure that efficiency and intuitiveness and utilitarian like function is just at the core of your design decisions. But when you're making a website that might be for like illustrating the values of a company or something like that, then you've got far more kind of artistic liberty that you can take.
Right.
And sometimes the design should be simple and minimalist, and it should get out of the way, and it should like as little design as possible. Like I'm a big fan of in general, my designs being very distilled in what they are, not being overly cluttered. But at the same time, we're not always making tools. We're not always making things that need to be so utilitarian. Like we can have some fun with like a funky typeface, or like things coming, like getting crazy with the layouts, like looking at old. I actually see web design in that way, like non-tool, non-user interface web design, as being a natural extension of graphic design.
Yeah.
And so the more that those of us who are designing for the web, can look at the history of graphic design, I think it will inspire a lot of new digital design that we're ready. It's our browsers are capable of this now. Like, our design tools are capable of this now.
Yeah, I think definitely, because I feel like I don't know, I feel like design. I totally agree with you. Like Dirk says, I feel like if it's supposed to be informative and get out of the way, like that's what your design is trying to say. Like, hey, I'm not here. Like,
yeah,
I'm just not here. You're here. This is your time.
Yeah.
And I felt like that's a language in itself. Like, I like the idea of like calling it like app or tool based design. And then there's like the exploratory nature of design, where like like I think it's like a marketing design, and I feel like that's like, hey, I'm here to tell a story.
Yeah.
And then the design elements can be more not flamboyant, but like just they're more part of the storytelling process, and they can lend their voices to it. And then that's where I so yeah, I think like, so definitely, like I feel like sometimes design is loud when it can be loud, and sometimes it's very quiet when it needs to be quiet and allow the other voices to come
Yeah.
in. So, cool.
Yeah, and like art can play a huge role in that. What you're saying is like a storytelling web design in a way that like probably doesn't need to play as much of a role when you're designing the interface for an SVG optimizer, right, for example.
Yeah. So like I think we've come a long way. I'm not sure if you remember this or not, but I talked about it like a while back. I forgot which episode it was, but Kai Cruz, he created a tool called Meta Tools, and I think they got bought. Like some part of them got bought by Adobe, but he would come out with some funky applications, and the user interface was really a part of your experience with it, because part of it was I think creating 3D landscapes, right, for like more mainstream consumerism. And so you would actually have like touch these, like it was all like computers back in the day, so it was like 3D forward objects, so you move them, and depending on your movement of the orbs, it would change the view of everything like that. And so it was like a very organic experience, but like hey, I just want to get in and get out. Like, and I was like
right.
So I don't want to have to like get clunky with my interface and trying to get out. But yeah, so it's kind of funny. But it was very unique. But in terms of a UI, but I want to get back to Sketch and talk about what would you say would be like the major hurdles if someone who's like coming from Photoshop or Illustrator or from the Adobe product realm, in terms of like, hey, I want to get on board with Sketch. What would you think? Which is kind of a tricky question, because you've done like 3 courses already on Sketch, so you probably have like some sort of, so it's kind of like some things that might be second nature. But what would you think is like the problems that people might have running into getting up and running with Sketch?
So I think that it also depends largely on on what somebody is used to designing in the Adobe tools, because they are like everything in the kitchen sink tools. They've been used for so many different things. If somebody is more used to a less interface or a less screen based design tool, and Sketch is very screen based in terms of its feature set, then simply getting used to thinking of responsive layouts, and Sketch has been adding some really neat features in that sense. Or thinking.
Yeah. So what do you mean by screen based?
Yeah. So screen based being something for something that ends up on a digital device. Okay. With a screen. That could be a website, that could be an app, that could be some components within that, like a digital icon, something that exists on pixels ultimately. And so Sketch is vector based, but all of the measurements are in pixels, and so it's kind of like this hybrid between Illustrator and Photoshop in that way, and then it has features that are really familiar for anybody who's done a lot of screen-based designer development work. So they've been adding a lot of responsive features. You can kind of lock something to one edge, and it will always stay locked to that edge. Or you can you have similar options for filling a photo into, say, a circle that you would have in CSS on the web, and you have blend modes in a way that not that the Adobe tools don't have blend modes, but I've found that the ones that are in Sketch, like the Adobe tools, have some that are not in CSS, for example. Right. And then simply thinking about a component-based workflow with symbols and with certain shared styles. Again, it's not that those are absent from the Adobe tools, and shared styles have been, or the equivalents have been really useful in, for example, designing books in InDesign for years. But they work a little bit differently and have some different needs when you're designing something that's going to end up on a screen. So that's what I mean by kind of like a native screen-based design tool. So thinking about responsive, thinking about component-based workflows, thinking about going between pixels and vector, really just like one keystroke to switch between them. And then one thing that I think a lot of people are not used to in the Adobe tools is the ease with which you can just duplicate an artboard or duplicate some layers and just kind of start creating another variation of them. Right. It's a very flexible and open tool. I was at a typography conference recently, and somebody asked if I had done my kind of type mock-ups in Sketch, and it wasn't because of anything aside from how many I made, because I made all these variations. I could make one and then just like kind of option drag my artboard and just start making some changes to it, and then option drag again, and go off in all of these fun directions in a way that it's not that you can't do that in an Adobe tool. It's just it's not quite as efficient. So the tool itself ends up having these fun effects on our workflows. In terms of challenges in diving into it, the Adobe tools expose a lot of buttons and a lot of palettes in kind of an airplane cockpit way, so that they're there, and it's a mistake to think that Sketch doesn't have all of those capabilities, or that it doesn't have many of those capabilities. It definitely doesn't have all of the ones that you'd find in a tool like Photoshop or Illustrator, but it has far more than you would imagine by opening it up and just looking at the interface. It's very simple, but there's a lot of power in the menus, and then there's this thriving plugin ecosystem that can fill in the gaps. So it's a tool that is simple on the outside. It's almost deceivingly simple. It doesn't look like a professional tool if you just open it up. Right. But all of these like professional designers are using it to design some of the most important things that we use every day.
I love that comment. It's like, it doesn't look like a professional tool, and I wonder have we fallen into a trap of like what looks like a professional tool? Like I don't know, like what
Dark backgrounds.
dark backgrounds. Yeah, it's like what's with the dark background? Yeah. But yeah, I have like with Adobe's subscription model, I feel like they've kind of they allow themselves to work more in terms of the onboarding process, and I really appreciate the onboarding, like what the thought they put into their Adobe products for onboarding for new projects. However, it really gets in my way. As someone who's been using their product forever, is like I don't need these options. I know where I'm going and what's going on. But yeah, that's kind of I like that question, that answer. Like it doesn't look like a professional tool. I think it's pretty funny and very very astute. So. What you mentioned plugins? Like, what plugins would you recommend? Like, what plugins do you use day in day out?
Oh gosh, I would almost have to fire up Sketch right now and look at my plugin menu. I would have to say that the most simple and utilitarian plugin that I love is called Rename It. Mm-hmm. It's for renaming a bunch of layers, and it has some cool features where you can number things sequentially, or put into layer names the width or height dynamically of whatever artboard or layer that you're renaming, mm-hmm. and so it's kind of a way of adding a little bit of logic and to this to renaming multiple layers or artboards, and it's just something that I end up doing all the time. Another one that can be useful, especially if you're not diving super deeply into optimizing SVGs kind of by hand. If you don't take my course on SVG workflows and you don't learn everything about that, then at least install Sketch's SVGO plugin. It will get you at least halfway to a good SVG. So I'm a big fan of that one. Or at least recommending that. I kind of have it turned off because I do all my stuff by flicking individual switches. They've also got a plugin for automatically compressing bitmaps. And, I've been bringing bitmaps into Photoshop's Save for Web menu for as long as I can remember.
Right.
And I still do that occasionally when I need to squeeze every little ounce out of a PNG. But as a result, like, that's time consuming. I would optimize a handful of the assets that I created, and by having this automatically on, every single PNG, every single JPEG that I export out of Sketch just gets optimized really quickly. It uses a bunch of the stuff within ImageOptim, and a bunch of those same underlying technologies. And sure, I could squeeze an extra ounce out in Photoshop, but I'd far rather have like 100% of my bitmaps compress than 2 out of 100 with like 10 kilobytes less. Here, let me jump into Sketch real quick.
Awesome.
I use Flinto a lot for prototyping, and they've got a great plugin. So that's one that I.
So I never heard of Flinto before. So Flinto is just an app for is it for documenting the interactions behaviors between layers?
It's for designing the interactions between like in your product, in your app, on your site. The Flinto is a prototyping tool that allows you to kind of link together your different screens, your different artboards in your design, and add some really cool custom animations to them, and figure out like how you should navigate through an app, and how to design those transitions between different states or between different screens. And there are a number of prototyping tools that are kind of or that have popped up, and Flinto is one of them. Framer is one that is more reliant on code, more reliant kind of on JavaScript, and so that approaches prototyping from more of a code-based angle. There's one that's pretty similar to Flinto called Principle, I'm biased. I helped design Flinto, and I just think like, especially if you're using Sketch, the interface is so similar in the ways that you would want it to be, in the ways that where you're like, I don't want to have to learn another tool. I just want to like have I just want to have a tool that is instantly familiar and allows me to create very advanced things very easily.
Right.
And that's what Flinto does.
Yeah, I mean,
and
I definitely agree with like if you know the tool, and you can work with it, the better. Because someone who I know is like who's one of our speakers in the past, Phil Kaufman. He's a really great Photoshop person. He spoke at a couple of events, and he knows Photoshop better than I do, and he actually wrote an article about saying like I've tried Sketch, I can't get it to work for me, but I open up Photoshop and I can get things done faster, and that's like because he's invested his time and resources over the years into it, and hey, this works for you, that's great,
totally,
yeah. So, but like I could see like how we're like with Flinto, I totally agree. Also, like you probably help them work on the application, you probably know it better than the other similar applications.
I do know it pretty well as a result. Yeah. One other plugin that came out recently, and it's far more than a plugin, really. It's kind of become its own tool. Is called Abstract, and I'm so excited about it.
Yeah.
It's basically, and this is I'm probably saying exactly what they don't want me to say.
Okay.
But it's like GitHub for sketch files,
right.
And so it's version control. But they've added so many more features and kind of collaboration features than you would get in kind of a simple GitHub repo setup. I think it's so essential if you're working on a team. And I work a lot with Git in the development projects that I work on, when I'm often working with another developer, and there are just so many things that a version control workflow helps with, and having a single source of truth like a master branch, and then not to mention just being able to go back and see the evolution of something that you designed. I mean, I have, for example, everything that I've done for Sketchmaster, whether it's which is my courses platform, everything that I've done from the logos to the interface of the like when you're watching the courses, to the website design, to all of the icons, to promotional graphics, to the list goes on and on. Yeah. All of that is in the same sketch file.
Yeah.
I mean, the ability to kind of go back and see when something was done or revert a change is incredible. So Abstract is really cool.
Nice.
I'm super excited. It just came out recently.
Right. Cool. Yeah. I knew it was under beta. I thought so I was waiting to hear
I think it's out now.
Okay. Cool. Nice. Yeah. It looks like you can sign up for it. Or I'm not sure if you can sign up for it. But yeah, I'm really looking forward to that. But yeah, it's amazing how Git and GitHub has just revolutionized the project, the world actually, because I was speaking to my editor. I'm working on a book right now, and I used to work in Word for writing a book, and I was like, so now I'm just like now we're working in Git, and it's awesome just to be able to track changes and all that stuff like that. So it's pretty awesome.
Yeah.
Cool, and I'm glad so. So what does Abstract have? I know I don't know if you know this or not, but probably been working on it. So, but while you're here, I was going to ask you, what is the difference between, what are the advantages of using Abstract versus just putting your files into GitHub? Is it just that they're more in tune with SVGs, or
it's that the sketch file format can't be read by Git. Okay. So basically it would just look like your whole file has changed.
Okay.
They've really deeply gone into the sketch file format.
Okay.
And for example, there's some really cool things. So when you change a symbol, which is like a reusable component that you might be using, like an icon, for example, that you could be using in 100 different artboards, 100 different screens in your design. if you change one thing on the symbol, it's not going to say that you just updated 100 screens. It's saying, okay, you updated the symbol, and it's really smart in that way. And and then the kind of the collaboration and the commenting and the branch merging and all of that is pretty familiar with some additional features for Teams. I've only been using it for a short while, and I do most of my work independently. But I mean, the biggest reason that you wouldn't use Git is because you can't really use Git with files.
I feel like it's like a stupid question, Chris. What are you talking about? But so I feel like
you wouldn't know if you hadn't tried it.
I mean, I heard about it and I was like, okay, I'm gonna wait till it comes out. I think I signed up for the beta, but I didn't really get into it. But I didn't get accepted, so my developer shame. But I'm like, it looks cool, kid. But cool. I think it's pretty awesome with that. So. But I do want to circle back because I feel like also I do want to hear other plugin ideas, but I do like the idea of using Sketch for iteration process and to be able to iterate, like you said, your slides earlier about being able to iterate. Because I feel like with responsible design, I feel like the burden on designers, especially if you're freelancing, I just feel like you have to build multiple versions of the same website and to be able to like easily take an existing idea for a phone and stretch it out to a desktop to maybe an HD display, like that's kind of great. And then also to be tying that into like an abstract where you actually store all these ideas and share them with other people. That's pretty awesome. So that's pretty great.
I would also make one other point, which is that what we're talking about here are certain things that that kind of help you create an ideal workflow and or an ideal process. And sometimes, and I've been finding this a lot recently, like sometimes the process shouldn't be holy. Mm-hmm. Like the process should be unique to each project a little bit.
Right.
And when you use the same process, you end up often with the same result, which isn't very inspiring. Yeah. So in some projects, you need that structure. Again, like when you're building a utilitarian tool, you need a bit more structure. Or when you're working with a team, you need more structure. Otherwise, it's just chaos. And yet I think what I'm finding really interesting is identifying when to break away from structure, when to just and this is one of the great things that I love doing in Sketch. Creating a new page, not even creating artboards. Like maybe I just want to design some icons or something, and I just or a logo, and I just start creating layers randomly and duplicating them, and just kind of having this messy desk area. And the more that you start adding to the same file, and especially if you're collaborating with anybody, you start getting into this if I make a change here, what if it's not right? If it's not the right change, or these artboards don't fit into this whole layout that all means something based on it's like maybe you arrange your artboards horizontally for the progression through your app and vertically through the different states of each screen, and where am I gonna duplicate my artboard and make some playful changes? And what if I make a change that affects a symbol? And so I'm a big fan of just having a messy area, and that could be a different file, right. But not version controlling something, or just not renaming your layers. Those things are really important when you're collaborating or when you're kind of putting something into production mode, but they really get in the way when you're just trying to generate ideas and be creative. And so I'm a big proponent for figuring out when you're in production mode and when you need rules and structure, and then when it's actually kind of getting in the way of your creative process.
Right. Yeah. I think definitely you definitely don't want to break in rules when you're at the start of a project, or you want to bring in a lot of creativity into it. You see that with other avenues, like if a screenplay, you don't want to have get too bound down to making sure your words are correct or have typos or whatever. You just want to just get the words on the page.
Yeah, just get them on there first.
And then revise. I mean, and so I definitely see with rules, and so and it's also process. I love the idea of not the concept of not keeping a process holy, because and I'm guilty of that too. Where we need to put things in process, and like I think you should have a one or two like a process in place, but also not be beholden to it, and say like, hey, and that's because I feel like having a process in place is also great because sometimes you wake up and you're like you don't want to remember what you just did, like you forget how you did things. And that's what great for computers are great for automation. They actually you actually have to put into process and write code to remember things, but sometimes having the multi steps to do that, and also where to break out is very important too. So cool.
And I do that a lot in development too. Like if the farther along I have a web project, for example, the less likely I am to write some experimental code and add it to it. So I end up doing making a lot of code pens. I'm like, well, here's just like this one little responsive layout, and I just need to figure out. I kind of need a messy area that I'm not going to affect the rest of the site. So I'll spend a day like engineering one thing in a code pen, and then I kind of integrate it later. But without that sandbox, it's difficult to play. And when we're not playing, we create boring stuff.
Yeah, and then that goes back to our earlier conversation about like our design being dictated by our tools and not being able to like jump ship and like actually go to a code pen and say like, okay, what if we had this? What if we had that? And experiment too. So definitely say that. So I don't mean to cut you off, but because I love plugin lists, especially for people who are masters of their tools or have taught their tools for the courses and stuff like that too. So any other tools after Abstract? Any plugins that you recommend?
I think those are the biggest plugins that I use. Okay. A lot of people are fans of Craft, and I think they're doing some really cool stuff. It's not actually a really big part of my workflow. I've also used some responsive design plugins in the past that are becoming, for better or for worse, a little more obsolete as Sketch adds some of those features in. I'd say rename it. So yeah, to summarize some of those, rename it. Flinto is just such an easy extension of Sketch for prototyping. Abstract for version control. The bitmap and the SVG compressor plugins are great. There's such a healthy plugin community. There's this really cool one called Looper that creates all of these abstract designs that kind of just continue patterns and in ways that like only a computer would create.
Cool. I'm gonna have to look that one up. That's awesome. So cool, awesome. I think that's a good stopping point. Can you tell people where they can find your courses and find you online?
Yeah, absolutely. So the easiest way to find links to just about everything that I do is on sketchmaster.com. If you scroll down a bit toward the bottom, there's a link to my own website and to my Medium articles and to my Twitter. And that's where all of the courses are, and all of my articles on Medium are up for free. And
okay, yeah, awesome. Well, thank you so much, Peter, for taking time today. I really appreciate you being on the show today. It's awesome. Thank you.
Happy to chat about this stuff. It's great.
Cool.